My name is Isabella Martinez, I'm 28 years old, and 3 months ago I vanished from my family's life without a single word of explanation. No goodbye, no forwarding address, no trace. They're probably still wondering where I went and why I left everything behind. But here's what they don't know yet, I didn't just disappear to escape their endless demands for money. I left because I discovered the most devastating family secret that shattered everything I believed about loyalty, love, and the people I called family. Before we dive into this wild family revenge story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. If you're ready to hear how I turned the tables on the family that betrayed me, smash that like button and subscribe because this story has more twists than a soap opera. Let me take you back to where this nightmare began. It was a rainy Thursday evening in October when my father called me for what I thought would be another routine guilt trip about family obligations. I was sitting in my cozy apartment in Portland, finally enjoying some peace after working a 12-hour shift as a nurse practitioner, when his voice cut through my evening like a rusty knife. "Isabella, we need to talk about your sister again," Dad said, his tone carrying that familiar weight of disappointment that had become his signature sound whenever he spoke to me. "Sophia's in trouble, real trouble this time." I should have hung up right there. For the past 5 years, every conversation with my father had followed the same script. Sophia, my younger sister by 3 years, had racked up another debt, made another terrible financial decision, or needed another bailout. And somehow, it was always my responsibility to fix it because I was the successful one in the family. "Dad, I already told you last month when I paid off her credit cards that I can't keep doing this," I said, rubbing my temples where a headache was already forming. "I have my own bills, my own student loans from nursing school. This is different, Isabella. She owes $35,000 to some very dangerous people. They're threatening her safety. Your sister could get hurt if we don't help her." $35,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. I'd already given Sophia over $60,000 in the past 3 years, money I'd scraped together from overtime shifts, money I'd saved for my own future, money I'd borrowed against my retirement fund. Each time, she'd sworn it was the last time, that she'd learned her lesson, that she was getting her life together. "Dad, where's this money supposed to come from?" "I don't have $35,000 just lying around," I said, my voice getting sharper despite my efforts to stay calm. "You have equity in your condo. You could take out a loan, or maybe sell it and move back home for a while. Family takes care of family, Isabella. That's what your mother would have wanted." There it was, the manipulation tactic that never failed to make me feel guilty. Bringing up Mom, who'd died of cancer 6 years ago, was Dad's nuclear option. But this time, something felt different. Maybe it was the exhaustion from constantly being the family's ATM, or maybe it was the way he'd so casually suggested I uproot my entire life to solve another one of Sophia's problems. "I need to think about this," I said finally. "Give me a few days." "Isabella, there isn't time. These people want their money by Friday or..." I hung up. For the first time in my adult life, I hung up on my father mid-sentence. My hands were shaking as I set the phone down, and I realized I was crying, not from sadness, but from rage and frustration that had been building for years. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the pattern that had emerged since Mom's death. Every few months, Sophia would get into some kind of financial trouble, and I'd be expected to solve it. Shopping addiction, gambling debts, bad business investments, loans to sketchy boyfriends, it was always something. And every time I hesitated, Dad would remind me that we were all the family we had left, that Mom would be ashamed of me if I didn't help my sister. But lying there in the dark, I started adding up the numbers in my head, and a horrible realization crept over me. In 3 years, I'd given Sophia over $60,000. That was more than many people made in a year. Where was all this money really going? The next morning, I did something I'd never done before. I hired a private investigator. It sounds dramatic, but I needed to know the truth about where my money was going. If Sophia was really in danger, if she really had gambling debts or was being threatened, I needed proof before I destroyed my own financial future. What Marcus, the private investigator, discovered over the next 2 weeks shattered my entire worldview. Sophia wasn't being threatened by dangerous people. She wasn't in debt to loan sharks or drowning in medical bills or any of the other stories she'd told me. Instead, she was living in a beautiful house in the suburbs that I'd unknowingly helped her buy. She'd been using my money as down payments and monthly mortgage payments on not just the house, but also a vacation rental property in Bend. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was what Marcus found when he dug deeper into her financial records. Sophia and my father had been planning this scheme together. They'd been systematically manipulating me for years, using my grief over Mom's death and my sense of family loyalty to fund Sophia's real estate investments. The evidence was all there in black and white, text messages between them discussing how much they could get from me each time, bank statements showing that the money I thought was going to pay off debts was actually being deposited into investment accounts, even receipts for expensive furniture and renovations for properties I didn't even know existed. They'd been laughing at me. For 3 years, while I'd been working overtime shifts and eating ramen noodles to help my struggling sister, they'd been building a real estate portfolio with my money. Every tearful phone call from Sophia about being broke, every guilt trip from Dad about family responsibility, every sleepless night I'd spent worrying about my sister's safety, it had all been an elaborate lie. The final piece of evidence that broke something fundamental inside me was an email I should never have seen. Marcus had managed to access some of Sophia's digital communications, and there it was, an email she'd sent to her boyfriend just 2 weeks earlier. In it, she called me the family ATM and joked about how easy it was to push Isabella's buttons whenever they needed more money. She'd even included a laughing emoji. I stared at that email for a long time, reading it over and over until the words burned themselves into my memory. "She's so predictable," Sophia had written. "Just mention Mom and she opens her wallet every time." That was the moment I realized I wasn't just being used, I was being mocked for my love and loyalty. The 2 people I'd trusted most in the world, the people I'd sacrificed my own dreams for, thought I was nothing more than a naive fool with deep pockets. After discovering the truth about my family's betrayal, I spent 3 days in a strange state of emotional numbness. I called in sick to work, which I'd never done unless I was actually dying, and sat in my apartment staring at the evidence Marcus had compiled. Photos of Sophia's house, bank statements, text message screenshots, property records, it was all there, undeniable proof that the people I'd loved most had been systematically robbing me for years. The crying came first. Ugly, body-shaking sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than my chest. I grieved for the relationship I'd thought I had with my sister, for the father I'd believed was looking out for our family's best interests, and for my own naivety in trusting them so completely. But after the tears dried up, something much colder and more dangerous took their place, a crystal-clear determination to make them pay for what they'd done. I'd always been the responsible one, the peacekeeper, the one who smoothed over family conflicts and made excuses for everyone else's bad behavior. But sitting there surrounded by evidence of their lies, I realized that my niceness had been weaponized against me. They'd counted on my love and loyalty to keep me compliant, to keep me writing checks without asking too many questions. Well, that Isabella was gone. The new Isabella was going to be strategic, calculating, and absolutely ruthless. My first step was to secure my own assets. I immediately changed all my passwords, moved my money to new accounts at a different bank, and consulted with a lawyer about protecting myself from any future financial manipulation. The lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia Williams, was fascinated by my case and helped me understand exactly what my family had done to me, which was, legally speaking, fraud on a massive scale. "You have grounds for both civil and criminal charges," Patricia told me during our consultation. "What they've done constitutes fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. You could have them prosecuted and sue them for everything they've taken from you, plus damages. But I had a different idea, one that would be far more satisfying than any court judgment. I was going to give them exactly what they'd been asking for, and then disappear from their lives completely, taking their carefully constructed house of cards down with me. The next phase of my plan required some research into Sophia's financial situation. What I discovered was even more damning than I'd expected. She hadn't just been using my money for down payments, she'd been using me as a cosigner on several loans without my knowledge. My signature had been forged on documents I'd never seen, making me legally responsible for debts I didn't even know existed. This was when my anger transformed into something much more focused and deadly. They hadn't just stolen from me, they'd committed identity theft and potentially destroyed my credit score. Every time I'd trusted them with personal information for family emergencies, they'd been using it to forge documents and open accounts in my name. I spent the next week documenting everything, creating a comprehensive file of their crimes. But instead of going to the police immediately, I decided to play their own game against them. I was going to be the loving, generous sister they expected me to be, right up until the moment I disappeared and left them holding the bag for their own greed. My plan was elegant in its simplicity. I would agree to help with this latest crisis, but instead of giving them clean money, I would set up a situation where their fraud would be exposed automatically. I'd learned enough about their operation to know that they were completely dependent on my financial support to maintain their lifestyle. Without me, their house of cards would collapse within months. The first part of my revenge was psychological. I called Dad back and told him I'd found a way to help Sophia, but I needed to meet with both of them to discuss the details. The relief in his voice was almost pathetic. He was so convinced that he could still manipulate me that he didn't even question why I'd suddenly become cooperative. We arranged to meet at Sophia's house, the house I'd unknowingly helped her buy. I wanted to see it with my own eyes, to walk through the rooms that my overtime shifts had paid for, to really understand the scope of their betrayal. When I arrived, I was struck by how beautiful everything was. Sophia had excellent taste, I had to give her that. The furniture was expensive but tasteful, the artwork was carefully chosen, the landscaping was professional. She'd built herself a lovely life with my money, and she was good enough at decorating to make it look like she'd earned it herself. Isabella. Sophia rushed to greet me at the door, throwing her arms around me in a hug that felt like acid on my skin. Thank you so much for coming. I knew I could count on you. You're the best sister anyone could ask for. The performance was flawless. If I hadn't seen the evidence, hadn't read her emails calling me a fool, I might have actually believed her tears of gratitude were real. But knowing the truth made every word feel like a knife twist. Dad was waiting in the living room, looking appropriately grave and concerned. Isabella, I can't tell you how much this means to our family. Your mother would be so proud of the woman you've become. I smiled and nodded, playing my part perfectly while inside I planned their destruction. Before we talk about the money, I said, settling into an armchair that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, I need to understand exactly what's happening. I want to see the paperwork, the threats, everything. If I'm going to risk my financial future, I need complete transparency. The panic that flashed across both their faces was delicious. They'd never had to provide actual proof before because I'd always just trusted them. Now they were scrambling to come up with documentation for threats that didn't exist, debts that were actually investments, and dangers that were completely fictional. Well, Sophia stammered, the people I owe money to don't exactly give you paperwork. They're not legitimate business people. Then how am I supposed to know where to send the money? I asked innocently. I can't just hand you $35,000 in cash. I need account numbers, payment addresses, something. I watched them exchange nervous glances, probably trying to figure out how to maintain their lie while also getting access to my money. It was fascinating to see them squirm, to watch the manipulators become the manipulated. That's when I dropped my first bomb. Actually, I've been thinking about this situation, and I have a better idea. Instead of just giving you money again, why don't I help Sophia declare bankruptcy? It would wipe out all her debts and give her a fresh start. The horror on their faces told me everything I needed to know. Bankruptcy would require full financial disclosure, which would expose their entire scheme. They couldn't afford to have a bankruptcy trustee examining Sophia's assets and income sources. No, Dad said quickly. That's not, bankruptcy is a big step. It would ruin her credit. But it would solve the problem permanently, I pressed. Unless there's some reason why bankruptcy wouldn't work. I let the question hang in the air, watching them struggle to come up with an answer that wouldn't expose their lies. This was just the beginning. Before I was done with them, they'd understand exactly what it felt like to be betrayed by the people who were supposed to love you most. The next few weeks were a masterclass in strategic patience. While Sophia and Dad scrambled to come up with fake documentation for their non-existent crisis, I was busy building an army of allies and setting the stage for their complete downfall. I'd learned from years of being manipulated that the best revenge isn't served hot, it's served cold, calculated, and with enough evidence to ensure the target never recovers. My first ally was Marcus, the private investigator who'd uncovered their scheme. He was fascinated by the case and agreed to help me gather additional evidence for a reduced fee. In 20 years of doing this job, he told me, I've never seen family fraud this elaborate or this heartless. We're going to make sure they pay for what they've done to you. Marcus introduced me to Detective Sarah Chen at the Portland Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit. Sarah had seen cases like mine before, and she was eager to build a solid case against my family. Family fraud is particularly devastating because it exploits love and trust, she explained during our first meeting. Victims often don't report it because they still hope for reconciliation. But you're different, you want justice, not just your money back. Together, we developed a plan that would not only expose their crimes but also help other potential victims. Sarah suspected that if they'd been this systematic with me, I probably wasn't their only target. She was right. After some digging, we discovered that they'd also borrowed money from several of Mom's old friends and extended family members, always with sob stories about medical bills or emergency expenses. My second crucial ally was Patricia Williams, the lawyer who'd initially consulted with me about the fraud. Patricia specialized in financial crimes and victim advocacy, and she was building a civil case alongside the criminal investigation. We're not just going to get your money back, she promised. We're going to make sure they can never do this to anyone else. But my most valuable ally turned out to be someone completely unexpected, Sophia's ex-boyfriend, Jake Morrison. Jake had dated Sophia for 2 years before breaking up with her 6 months earlier, and he reached out to me after hearing through mutual friends that I was investigating financial irregularities in the family. I always wondered where Sophia got her money, Jake told me when we met at a coffee shop downtown. She claimed she was struggling financially, but she was always buying expensive things and talking about her investment properties. When I asked questions, she'd get defensive and change the subject. Jake had kept some text messages and emails from their relationship that proved Sophia had been lying to him too, claiming poverty while secretly building wealth with my money. More importantly, he had recordings of phone conversations where Sophia had bragged about manipulating me and Dad's role in the scheme. She used to joke about how easy it was to make you feel guilty, Jake said, his voice heavy with disgust. She'd say things like, Isabella's such a bleeding heart, all I have to do is cry and mention Mom and she'll write me a check. It made me sick, but I didn't realize how deep it went. The recordings Jake provided were devastating. In one conversation, Sophia laughed about forging my signature on loan documents. In another, she discussed with Dad how they could time their requests for maximum emotional impact, right before holidays or the anniversary of Mom's death, when I'd be most vulnerable to guilt manipulation. But the most damning recording was one where Sophia talked about her long-term plan. She wasn't just stealing from me in the short term, she was planning to manipulate me into making her the beneficiary of my retirement accounts and life insurance policies. In her mind, I was nothing more than a walking ATM machine that would eventually pay her entire retirement. She said the perfect scenario would be if you died in some kind of accident, Jake told me, his face pale as he played that particular recording. She said she'd inherited Mom's jewelry and family photos, but you got the real money and she deserved her share. Hearing my own sister casually discuss how convenient my death would be was the moment any remaining doubt about my revenge plan disappeared completely. These weren't people who'd made a mistake or gotten in over their heads, they were predators who'd systematically destroyed my trust and financial security while planning to benefit from my death. Armed with all this evidence, I began the next phase of my plan. Making myself indispensable to their scheme while secretly documenting everything for the authorities. I told them I'd found a way to help Sophia, but it would require me to become more involved in managing her finances to make sure the money went to the right places. I think what we need is better financial planning as a family, I told them during our next meeting. I want to help, but I also want to make sure this never happens again. So I'm proposing that I become Sophia's financial advisor and help her set up proper budgets and payment systems. They couldn't refuse without exposing their lies, so they agreed to let me have access to Sophia's financial accounts and records. Of course, they tried to hide the real accounts and only showed me fake ones they'd set up specifically for this purpose, but I already knew about their real assets thanks to Marcus's investigation. The beauty of this arrangement was that it gave me legal access to their financial systems while they thought they were still controlling the narrative. Every day, I gathered more evidence of their fraud while playing the role of the helpful sister and daughter they expected me to be. I also began reaching out to other people they'd scammed. Using the information Detective Chen had helped me gather, I contacted Mom's friends and our extended family members who'd loaned them money over the years. The response was overwhelming. Nearly everyone had a story about being asked for emergency loans that were never repaid, always with heartbreaking stories about medical bills or family crises. My Aunt Maria was particularly angry when I told her what I'd discovered. I gave them $8,000 2 years ago because your father said Sophia needed surgery, she said, her voice shaking with rage. I couldn't really afford it, but family is family. I've been too embarrassed to ask for it back, but now I know it was all lies. By this point, we'd identified over 15 different people who'd been scammed by my family, for a total of more than $200,000. What had started as a personal quest for justice had become something much larger, a chance to expose a systematic pattern of fraud that had hurt our entire community. The evidence was becoming overwhelming, and Detective Chen was ready to move forward with arrests. But I asked her to wait just a little longer. I wanted to give them one final chance to hang themselves completely, and I had the perfect opportunity coming up. Sophia's birthday was approaching, and Dad had suggested we throw her a big party to celebrate family togetherness after all the recent stress. It was perfect, a public gathering where I could make my final move while ensuring maximum witnesses and emotional impact. I agreed to host the party at my condo and even offered to pay for everything, playing the generous sister role one last time. I sent out invitations to everyone who mattered, extended family, Mom's old friends, people from church, even some of Sophia's coworkers and acquaintances. I wanted a big audience for the grand finale. As I planned the party, I could barely contain my excitement. In just a few more weeks, I would serve them the justice they'd been earning for 3 years. They thought they were celebrating another successful manipulation, but they were actually attending their own funeral. The only question left was whether they'd realize what was happening before it was too late to stop it. But the thing about revenge is that once you start down that path, it becomes easier and easier to justify increasingly extreme measures. And I was about to cross a line that would change not just their lives, but mine as well. The night of Sophia's birthday party arrived with perfect autumn weather, crisp air, golden leaves, and a sense of anticipation that felt almost electric. I'd spent weeks preparing for this moment, and everything was falling into place exactly as I'd planned. The guest list included 43 people, all carefully chosen for maximum impact when the truth came out. I'd decorated my condo beautifully, with photos of our family throughout the years, including many pictures of Mom that I knew would tug at everyone's heartstrings. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was using the same emotional manipulation tactics against them that they'd perfected on me. But tonight, I was the one controlling the narrative. Sophia arrived fashionably late, wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. She hugged me warmly, playing her part perfectly. "Isabella, this is incredible. You've outdone yourself. I can't believe you did all this for me." Dad worked the room like a politician, telling anyone who would listen about what a wonderful daughter I was and how proud he was of my success. "Isabella has always been the responsible one," he told Aunt Maria. "We're so lucky to have her taking care of the family." The guests mingled, ate the catered food I'd provided, and shared warm memories of our family. Several people commented on how nice it was to see our family so close and supportive of each other. If only they knew what was really happening behind the scenes. I waited until everyone had arrived and settled in with drinks before making my move. Standing in the center of the living room, I tapped my wine glass to get everyone's attention. "Thank you all for coming tonight to celebrate Sophia's birthday," I began, my voice warm and loving. "As many of you know, our family has been through some challenging times since we lost Mom 6 years ago. But through it all, we've stuck together and supported each other, just like she would have wanted." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Sophia beamed at me, probably thinking this was going to be another guilt trip speech about family loyalty that would make everyone more sympathetic to her financial struggles. "Tonight, I want to share something very special with all of you," I continued, pulling out a thick folder that I'd placed strategically on the coffee table. "Over the past few weeks, I've been working on a surprise project, a complete financial analysis of how our family has supported each other over the years." The room fell silent, and I noticed Dad and Sophia exchange a quick, nervous glance. But it was too late to stop me now. "You see, I've always been proud of how we take care of each other in times of need. In the past 3 years alone, I've contributed over $60,000 to help Sophia through various emergencies. Dad has been instrumental in coordinating this support and making sure I understood when help was needed most urgently." I opened the folder and began pulling out documents, bank statements, property records, photographs, and printed emails. But as I was putting together this financial timeline, I discovered something truly remarkable. It turns out that my money has been even more successful than I realized. I held up the first photograph, a beautiful exterior shot of Sophia's house. "This is the house that Sophia bought with my emergency loan money. Isn't it gorgeous?" The down payment came from what I thought was credit card debt relief. Gasps echoed around the room as people recognized the house that Sophia had claimed to be renting from a friend. But I wasn't done. "And this," I said, holding up another photo, "is the vacation rental property in Bend that was purchased with money I provided for gambling debt relief. According to the property records, it's been generating rental income for over 18 months. The room was completely silent now except for the sound of papers rustling as I pulled out more evidence. Sophia had gone pale, and Dad looked like he was about to be sick. "But here's my favorite part," I said, my voice still perfectly sweet and conversational. "I found some text messages and emails that really show how much my family appreciates my generosity." I began reading directly from Sophia's communications with Dad and her ex-boyfriend. "She's so predictable, just mention Mom and she opens her wallet every time. Isabella is like the family ATM, but way more convenient because she delivers." The silence in the room was deafening. I could see shock, disgust, and anger spreading across the faces of our guests as the reality of what they were hearing sank in. "Oh, and this email is particularly touching," I continued, pulling up another document on my phone. "I can't believe how easy it is to manipulate her. She actually thinks we're struggling when we're building a real estate empire with her money." Aunt Maria stood up abruptly, her face flushed with rage. "Are you telling me that the $8,000 I gave you for Sophia's surgery went into buying investment property?" Before Dad could answer, I continued my presentation. "Actually, Aunt Maria, that's just the beginning. Detective Chen from the Portland Police Financial Crimes Unit helped me track down all the fraudulent loans. Would you like to know how much money they've stolen from our extended family and Mom's friends? I didn't wait for an answer before revealing the master list that Marcus and Detective Chen had compiled. $237,000 from 15 different people, all with fake emergency stories, all coordinated between my father and sister. The room erupted in angry voices as people realized they'd all been scammed. Mom's best friend started crying when she realized the money she'd borrowed against her retirement to help with Sophia's medical bills had actually gone into a vacation rental. Isabella, let me explain, Dad started, but I cut him off. Oh, there's more to explain, I said, pulling out the final piece of evidence. Like the forged loan documents where my signature was faked to make me responsible for debts I never knew existed. Or the identity theft charges that Detective Chen is preparing to file on Monday morning. Sophia finally found her voice, but it came out as a desperate whine. Isabella, you don't understand. We were going to pay everyone back when the properties appreciated. With what money? I snapped, my composure finally cracking slightly. You've never made a legitimate house payment. Every mortgage payment, every property tax bill, every maintenance cost has come from money stolen from me and our family. I turned to address the room one final time. I want everyone here to know that full restitution will be made to every person who was defrauded. The properties purchased with stolen money are being seized, and Detective Chen assures me that criminal charges will ensure accountability. Looking directly at Sophia and Dad, I delivered my final blow. And as for family loyalty, I learned that from the best teachers. You taught me that family means using love as a weapon, trust as a tool for theft, and grief as leverage for fraud. Well, congratulations. You created exactly the daughter you deserved. The party ended with police sirens wailing in the distance as Detective Chen and her team arrived to execute the arrest warrants I'd requested for that evening. As handcuffs clicked around Dad's and Sophia's wrists, I realized that justice wasn't just about punishment, it was about finally being free from the people who'd turned my love against me. The aftermath of Sophia's birthday party was swift and devastating, for them. Within 72 hours, my carefully orchestrated plan had dismantled their entire world, and I watched it happen with the cold satisfaction of someone who'd finally balanced the scales of justice. The arrests made the local news, which was deeply satisfying in a way I hadn't expected. Father-daughter real estate fraud scheme exposed ran as a headline in the Portland Tribune, complete with mugshots that showed Dad looking confused and Sophia looking absolutely furious. The article detailed how they'd defrauded their own family members and community for years, building a property portfolio worth over $400,000 with money stolen through elaborate emotional manipulation schemes. My phone rang constantly for days after the arrests, reporters wanting interviews, family members demanding explanations, and surprisingly, other fraud victims reaching out to thank me for having the courage to expose the truth. The story had struck a nerve because family financial abuse is far more common than most people realize, but victims rarely speak up because of shame and misplaced loyalty. Detective Chen called me on Monday morning with an update that made my coffee taste even sweeter than usual. We've executed search warrants on both properties and their personal accounts, she reported. What we found is even worse than we initially thought. They've been running this scam for at least 5 years, and we've identified evidence of additional victims in 3 other states. It turned out that Dad and Sophia had been traveling to visit distant relatives and Mom's old friends from college, spinning elaborate sob stories about medical emergencies and financial crises. They'd stolen over $300,000 from people who'd trusted them simply because they were family or had loved my mother. The federal authorities are getting involved because it crosses state lines, Detective Chen continued. Your father and sister are looking at serious federal fraud charges on top of the state charges. We're talking about potential sentences of 15 to 20 years. The civil case that Patricia Williams was building was equally promising. We're going to recover every penny they stole, she assured me during our strategy meeting. The properties will be sold, their assets will be liquidated, and every victim will be made whole. Beyond that, we're pursuing punitive damages for the emotional distress and breach of fiduciary duty. But the most satisfying part wasn't the legal victories, it was watching their carefully constructed facade crumble in real time. Within a week of their arrests, the local community had turned against them completely. The church where Dad had served as a deacon for 15 years asked him to resign. Sophia's real estate license was suspended pending investigation. Their social media accounts, which had been full of fake humble bragging about their success and family values, were flooded with angry comments from people they'd scammed. Jake, Sophia's ex-boyfriend who'd provided crucial evidence, called me to share some particularly delicious karma. Sophia's been trying to contact me from jail, he told me, laughing. She wants me to post her bail and hire her a lawyer. She actually said I owed her because our breakup damaged her emotional state and contributed to her poor decision-making. Even from behind bars, Sophia was still trying to manipulate people and avoid taking responsibility for her actions. Some people never learn. The property seizures happened faster than I'd expected. Within 2 weeks, both houses had been placed in receivership and were scheduled for auction to compensate victims. I drove by Sophia's house one afternoon and saw the federal asset seizure signs posted on the lawn, with all the expensive furniture and artwork she'd bought with my money being catalogued by federal marshals. But the sweetest moment came when I received a call from Dad's lawyer, requesting a meeting to discuss family reconciliation and possible plea arrangements. They wanted me to advocate for leniency in exchange for full restitution and public apologies. I met with the lawyer, a nervous man named Robert Sterling, at his downtown office. He clearly thought he could appeal to my sense of family loyalty one last time. "Ms. Martinez," he began, "I understand you've been through tremendous pain because of your family's poor choices. But at the end of the day, these are still your father and sister. Surely there's some way we can resolve this that doesn't involve destroying their lives completely." I listened patiently to his entire pitch about family forgiveness, rehabilitation, and the devastating impact that long prison sentences would have on Dad's health and Sophia's future. When he finished, I smiled politely and delivered the response I'd been rehearsing for weeks. "Mr. Sterling," I said, "for 3 years, my father and sister systematically destroyed my financial security, mental health, and ability to trust anyone. They stole my money, forged my signature, and laughed about how easy it was to manipulate my love for them. They didn't just rob me, they robbed elderly family friends, they stole from people grieving my mother's death, and they planned to benefit from my eventual death." I leaned forward in my chair, making sure he understood every word. They had countless opportunities to stop, to tell the truth, to treat me with basic human dignity. Instead, they doubled down on their cruelty every single time. So no, there will be no family reconciliation. There will be no plea deals that I support. They made their choices, and now they get to live with the consequences. Sterling tried one more manipulation tactic, the same one Dad had used for years. "But what would your mother think about you destroying your own family?" I stood up to leave, but turned back to deliver my final message. "My mother would be proud that I finally learned to value myself enough to demand justice. She would be horrified by what they did, and she would support every single action I've taken to stop them from hurting anyone else." The meeting ended with Sterling looking defeated and me feeling lighter than I'd felt in years. Walking out of that office building into the crisp autumn air, I realized that I was finally free, not just from their financial manipulation, but from the toxic guilt and obligation that had controlled my decisions for so long. That evening, I started planning the next phase of my life. With the civil suit proceeding and criminal charges filed, my role in their downfall was essentially complete. I'd testified to the grand jury, provided all the evidence I'd gathered, and cooperated fully with both state and federal investigators. Now it was time to think about what I wanted to do with the freedom I'd fought so hard to achieve. For the first time in years, I could make decisions based on what would make me happy rather than what my family expected of me. It was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. But first, I had one more important step to complete, the promise I'd made to myself 3 months earlier when I'd first discovered their betrayal. It was time to disappear completely and start building a life where family meant chosen loyalty rather than obligated servitude. 6 months after Sophia's birthday party exposed everything, I'm writing this story from my new home in Asheville, North Carolina, surrounded by the Blue Ridge Mountains and a life I built entirely on my own terms. The disappearance I mentioned at the beginning wasn't dramatic or mysterious, it was a calculated decision to start fresh in a place where my past couldn't reach me. The legal proceedings concluded exactly as Patricia Williams had predicted. Dad was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison for fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. Sophia received 10 years for her role in the scheme. The judge specifically noted the egregious breach of family trust and systematic targeting of vulnerable victims in imposing sentences at the upper end of the guidelines. Every victim received full restitution from the sale of the properties and seizure of assets. Aunt Maria got her $8,000 back with interest. Mom's college friends were compensated for the fake medical emergency loans. Even people I'd never met, who'd been scammed during Dad and Sophia's out-of-state trips, received checks that helped restore their faith in justice. But the most important outcome wasn't financial, it was the peace I found in finally understanding what real family actually means. It's not about blood relations or genetic connections. Real family consists of people who choose to love and support you without hidden agendas, manipulation tactics, or conditional terms. I found that kind of family here in Asheville, starting with my neighbor Mrs. Henderson, a 70-year-old retired teacher who brought me homemade cookies on my first day and has never once asked me for money or favors. She invited me to join her book club, which led to friendships with 6 incredible women who've become my chosen sisters. There's Sarah, a divorced mom of 2 who works as a veterinarian and shares my love of hiking. Maria, an artist from Mexico who teaches pottery classes and has helped me discover talents I never knew I had. Jennifer, a retired nurse who mentors new healthcare workers and reminds me why I chose my profession in the first place. These women know my story. I was honest about why I moved to North Carolina and what I'd been through with my biological family. Their response was immediate support without judgment, advice without manipulation, and friendship without hidden costs. They showed me what healthy relationships actually look like. My career has flourished in ways I never imagined possible when I was constantly stressed about family financial crises. I joined a healthcare clinic that serves rural communities, and for the first time in my professional life, I'm working because I love helping people rather than because I need overtime money to fund someone else's lies. 6 months ago, I was promoted to clinical director, overseeing a team of nurse practitioners who provide care to underserved populations throughout Western North Carolina. The work is challenging but fulfilling in ways that go far beyond financial compensation. I'm making a real difference in people's lives, and I'm doing it without anyone undermining my efforts or stealing the fruits of my labor. I've also started speaking at conferences about family financial abuse, working with organizations that help victims of domestic financial fraud. My story resonates with more people than I ever expected. Apparently, family members who exploit love and trust for financial gain are far more common than most people realize. The speaking engagements have led to consulting work with law enforcement agencies, helping them recognize patterns of family fraud and develop better resources for victims. Detective Chan and I have stayed in touch, and she often refers cases to me where victims need someone who understands the unique emotional complexity of being betrayed by family. Last month, I received a letter from Dad in federal prison. He'd apparently found my new address through some combination of legal documents and online searching. The letter was exactly what I expected, a masterpiece of manipulation disguised as remorse, blaming his actions on grief over Mom's death and financial stress, asking for forgiveness and suggesting that we could rebuild our relationship when he was released. I read it once, laughed, and threw it in the trash without responding. Some people never learn, but I've learned enough for all of us. The man who wrote that letter doesn't deserve access to my life, my energy, or my emotional labor. He made his choices, and I've made mine. Sophia has tried to contact me through social media and mutual acquaintances, but I blocked her completely. According to updates from Patricia Williams, she's filed multiple appeals and continues to maintain that she was somehow the victim in all of this. The narcissistic inability to accept responsibility is almost impressive in its completeness. But here's what I want you to understand from my story: cutting toxic people out of your life, even family members, isn't cruel or selfish. It's an act of self-preservation and self-respect. You don't owe loyalty to people who exploit your love. You don't owe forgiveness to people who show no genuine remorse. You don't owe your future happiness to people who systematically destroyed your past security. The guilt they trained me to feel about prioritizing my own well-being has completely disappeared. I sleep peacefully knowing that I protected myself and others from further harm. I wake up excited about my work and my relationships because they're based on mutual respect rather than manipulation. My bank account is healthier than it's ever been, not because I'm making dramatically more money, but because I'm not constantly hemorrhaging cash to fund other people's lies. I've been able to save for my own future, plan my own adventures, and even help my chosen family when they face legitimate challenges, because that's what real love looks like. 2 weeks ago, I bought a small cabin in the mountains as an investment property, purchased entirely with my own money, for my own benefit, with my own name on all the legal documents. Standing on the deck of that cabin, looking out over the valley below, I felt a satisfaction that had nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with self-determination. Sometimes people ask me if I regret exposing my family, if I wish I'd tried harder to reconcile, if I miss having those relationships in my life. The answer is simple: I don't miss being used, manipulated, or taken for granted. I don't miss the anxiety of never knowing when the next financial crisis would emerge. I don't miss loving people who saw my love as a weakness to exploit rather than a gift to cherish. What I gained by walking away from toxic family relationships was the space to build healthy ones. I gained the self-respect that comes from refusing to accept mistreatment. I gained the peace that comes from surrounding yourself with people who value you for who you are rather than what you can provide. So here's my question for you. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and self-respect? How do you handle relationships where love feels more like obligation? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, whether you've experienced family betrayal, workplace revenge, or just needed to set boundaries with people who took advantage of your kindness. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more real-life drama with satisfying endings. Share it with anyone who might need to hear that they have the right to protect themselves from toxic relationships, even family ones. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is to choose the family that chooses you back. Life's too short to spend it being someone else's ATM, and you deserve relationships built on love rather than manipulation. Until next time, take care of yourselves and remember that justice isn't always served in courtrooms. Sometimes it's served by simply walking away and building something better.